Hello, welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're back with an interesting internal view of how to change a business. Trek Bicycles recently caught our attention with 10 changes it's making to make its business more sustainable and reduce its environmental impact. As CEO John Burke put it in Trek's 2021 sustainability report, the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. And so Trek is making it a mission to save, or at least reduce its impact on the Earth so that we can all collectively save the planet together. Trek went on to lay out good ideas that any company can learn from. And we're talking today with Eric Bjorling, who is Trek's Director of Brand Marketing and Public Relations, about how they're making what they described as just getting started moves to moving fast and taking real action to reduce our environmental impact. So let's discover what Trek has learned so far. You can, of course, check out Trek at Trekbikes, TREKBIKES, all one word, .com. Welcome to the show, Eric. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, first off, and I've read a lot of sustainability reports. Trek is extremely specific in its sustainability report about the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that it contributes to the atmosphere annually. And most of the 300,000 metric tons of CO2 that the company has produced is associated with making bikes, which are, you can't completely count at this time the total impact. So I'm wondering, can you tell us first, what is Trek's 2030 emissions goal in terms of tons of CO2? Are you able to quantify that at this point?
Not really quite at this point. I think we're still so early in our journey. Our first step was really trying to understand exactly what our impact was. Take a look at where we can make reasonable and actually meaningful impacts, and then build a plan around that, and then get started kind of activating on that plan. What we're really trying to do in the first year is establish a baseline, see what we can get done in a year so that we can understand what those actions can mean. And then I think we're going to take a look at that longer term and actually have some more actionable goals for ourselves.
Now, that raises an interesting question, and that is because we are still so early in this journey of understanding enterprise impacts, granted, farther ahead than a lot of our consumer impact understanding. The sustainability report itself can be a trigger internally to get people thinking about making better decisions. How are you using the sustainability report internally at Trek to get everybody working together towards the North Star of achieving those CO2 reductions?
Absolutely. I think our internal journey has actually been probably the most important thing that we've had to do first. Trek is a place that is filled with passionate, incredible people doing a lot of great work. And, a year or two ago, our president and our senior leadership had really said, guys, we need to get better. We need to become better global corporate citizens. Everybody, we need to bake environmental goals into our objectives and key results throughout the organization. The issue that we had there, though, is we didn't actually know where we were even starting from. And we had a lot of people doing interesting work, but we didn't necessarily know how meaningful or impactful, and it wasn't necessarily a coordinated effort. Yeah. And so what we did there is we took a look at the report and said, this is not only an opportunity to report on where we are at and what our impact is, this is actually the opportunity for us to become singularly focused and working together in a coordinated effort across the entire organization. Trek is a global company. We've got 17 offices across the world. We've got thousands of employees who work in different areas of the business. And how do we put something together that really outlines very clearly where we are, what our intentions are, and how we're going to get there? And that was essentially, I think, maybe even the most meaningful piece of the entire report was not only just developing the goals, but developing the policy and the strategy of how to achieve those goals.
So I'm curious, did you ask everybody to read the report? How did you get folks engaged with it?
It wasn't as hard as we thought it would be to get people interested. This is a topic that people at Trek are already super passionate about. I think we're very blessed. I think we're very blessed to be a bicycle company. Now that doesn't necessarily alleviate or excuse us of any responsibility that we have to the emissions that we do create. Bicycle companies still do manufacture products. We still have an impact. But you have a lot of like-minded people here, a lot of passionate people about cycling, a lot of passionate people about sustainable living. And so we're already blessed to have a workforce that is receptive to this message. What they really wanted to see, I think, they wanted to know, because everybody's is willing to do whatever it takes. They just needed to know what that is, and what we needed from them, and we needed to decide what it was we were asking of them. And so when we put this out there, I remember, I know this because I'm the one who communicated it internally. The response has been unlike almost anything I've ever seen. I mean, we've done a lot of interesting work. We've done a lot, and we launch a lot of interesting products, and people are obviously very passionate about bikes and the things that we produce every single day. But this was something different, where every single person at Trek has a responsibility to uphold these values and help with this mission. And I think people are taking it personally, and that's exactly the message that we end the report with. We say we are taking this personal, and every single person at Trek has a responsibility to this. And I have got hundreds of emails from across the globe of thank you for publishing this. I appreciate the transparency so much. I want to get involved. And now our next report is essentially going to be, how did we activate the employee base and rally them around these goals and these tenets that we've put out there.
Well, one of the things that struck me about the report is it's a lot less like the sustainability reports that are aimed at regulatory readers or investors. It's written for ordinary people to understand. There's complexities, but it's written for people to understand and engage with. Was that a conscious decision?
100%. We're blessed with being a privately held, family-owned company. The way that we wanted this report not to be some lofty kind of esoteric piece with a lot of data that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Because I think we talk about this all the time internally, especially with my team. It's there's data and then there's wisdom, and if you don't have the second part, then the data is really it's tough to get any meaning out of it. So when we were handed our emissions report, and we had a great third-party partner that was able to really study our procedures and our operations and do a deep dive with us to help us get there, the data that they delivered to us was incredible, but it was very hard to discern and get anything out of without somebody with that kind of expertise walking you through. So the real challenge for my team, and I'm blessed to lead an incredible team of communicators and storytellers, was to take this really interesting but very difficult concept, and how do we boil this thing down so that we're very clear, we're very transparent, we're highly accurate. I think accuracy was something that we were so sensitive to, because there's so much sensitivity in the marketplace about greenwashing and the different messages that people are putting out there. And we said from the beginning, we are not doing that. And if that is what we're doing, then we need to do something else. So that was, I think, one of the more challenging things, was to take some really difficult and very involved concepts and really boil them down and distill them in a way that we feel comfortable communicating them and people feel comfortable digesting them. Because I think so much that's out there is hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I think that's sometimes the hesitation that companies or people have had to really getting into their sustainability journeys. It just seems so difficult, and it just seems so hard to understand that I think people almost kind of had this different reaction to it. So we knew that by making it easy, that was going to be the way to get people on board.
Well, and easy and complete is, I think, the other component. Yes. Now, before we jump into the ideas, I want to ask just a couple of questions that jumped out for me. I noticed that the most advanced bikes, the Madone and the Marlin mountain bikes, also, which use carbon fiber frames and so forth, also represented the lowest carbon footprint amongst all the bikes you make. So you see advanced materials as one of the paths out of the wasteful approach to manufacturing.
We do. It's interesting. We took a look at 4 of our different platforms. We took a look at a carbon fiber road bike. We took a look at a aluminum hardtail mountain bike, which also represents a lot of hybrids. That's kind of your high volume product. You take a look at full suspension, full suspension mountain bikes, which have a completely different supply chain because they've got suspension pieces and manufacturers. And then you take a look at electric bikes, the fastest growing category. What does that look like? I mean, that's got batteries and a whole host of other suppliers that work in that space. And you take a look at what the differences are, and really what you're taking a look at, you're going, it's materials, It's aluminum versus carbon versus steel. What is the ability to also close that loop? I actually think the closed loop solution is the thing that is the missing piece right now throughout the bicycle industry that a lot of people are doing interesting work in, but I think it represents probably the biggest opportunity for us. But you take a look at that, and then transportation. How close can you source all of the materials to make one bike? A bike is the sum of many, many, many parts and many, many suppliers. And if you're shipping products all over and you're shipping parts and pieces all over the world, that can actually really have a big impact on the carbon requirement of making a product. And so it really depends on a lot of factors. But that was the nice thing, that we took a look at those 4 categories, and that gave us kind of a baseline to work on, because that really represents essentially the 4 main categories of bikes that we sell at volume.
Well, we're going to talk about the shipping in a few minutes, but the other question I want to ask about is, the Marlin mountain bike produces about 255 pounds of CO2 equivalent, the Madone 434 pounds. Is Trek considering offering ways to offset those emissions to customers? Is that something that you can use to reduce your enterprise emissions, or do you see that as simply sort of passing the buck? The customer part of the equation is I think massively important. Again, I think we're blessed in that we are a bike company, and in that there lies the opportunity to help people actually make their product carbon neutral and almost carbon negative. There's a lot of companies out there that there's a lot of ways too. And there's buying credits. There's there's carbon mitigation. There's carbon restoration. There's forest restoration. There's a lot of ways that companies can reduce their carbon impact. We're very sensitive to that, and we're actually very sensitive to the meaningfulness of all that. One thing that we took a look at and said, actually, being a bike company is an advantage that we really do need to take, that we really need to, I think, play on here. And that the customer part of the equation is pretty simple for us. It's if we can convince, and if we can help, and if we can do the things that we need to do to help consumers replace. We did this. Part of establishing all of these carbon requirements for our bikes was to get to a number where we could say, well, how many miles would it take for somebody to ride their bike or replace carbon emissions to actually make their bike carbon neutral, carbon negative? Right. And this is kind of an interesting concept. You're seeing a lot of other companies kind of talk about this. It's like, how much do you actually need to interact with this product to replace the carbon that it took to make it? We found out that given the average amount of carbon burned by an average gallon of gas, with the average amount of carbon that it takes to make a bike, the average number for a consumer to ride their bike and replace the carbon that it took to make it. And these miles are specific, that you would have to ride these in replacement of a car trip. It's 430 miles. And it's this rule of 430 that we're going to put a lot of investment behind it in education, because while a lot of people take a look at 430 miles and say, I could never ride my bike that far, most people do ride their bike that far in the lifetime. That's a couple of months of 20-mile rides. Right. Or even, or a couple of years of 5-mile rides. Exactly. And what we're taking a look at there, and we're just saying 430 miles of replaced carbon emissions mileage. So I'm going to go 2 miles to the grocery store on my bike today rather than drive my car. If you can do that 430 miles over the lifetime of ownership of the bike, you have actually kept the same amount of carbon out of the atmosphere that it took to make that bike. And while people can say, that's passing the buck, and I can see where they can come from on that, well, we take a look at it and say, that's actually a way that we can engage our customers and help them use the bike to not just create a carbon neutral product for us, but that has more impact for their local community, their health, the health and sustainability of where they live. And if we can get more people, if we can do the things that we need to do to help people ride bikes more often, that's a way that we can actually change the world. Well, and one of the things that you included in the report was the development of the Trek Foundation to support the building of public bike trails and so forth. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as something that you need to do in partnership with government in order to drive more accessibility for bikes? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we've worked for a number of years with People for Bikes, which is bike industry's sort of lobby in Washington, and also works on infrastructure projects throughout the country. They do an incredible job of lobbying for more bike infrastructure, whether it's transportation bills,
whether it's safe streets, things like that, safe streets legislation. So there's that aspect of it. There's also the Trek Foundation is going to do, I think, a phenomenal job in working with local municipalities, bike shops, local advocates to ensure that people have a safe and open place to ride bikes. There's the making of the bike, but I think what the industry really could do a much better job of focusing on is creating a more welcoming environment for people to use those bikes. We know for a fact that the number one reason most people don't ride their bike more often is because they don't feel that they have a safe space to do it. Mm-hmm. And if we can attack that root, and if we can help local communities become safer for bikes, healthier places to live, more sustainably, environmentally, that's us fulfilling our mission.
Okay. Well, these are all great. I want to get to the ideas. Let me just kind of set the stage here. So you shared 10 ideas. Mm-hmm. Each of them represents really, I think, significant changes in the way that you handle the logistics of the business, which requires planning and a different way of executing. And I want to ask you just some questions that address the concerns that I always hear from business. So let's start with this. Now, air freight has 84 times the carbon footprint of transporting by ocean, slow freight versus fast freight.
Absolutely.
Trek is going to reduce its air freight mileage by 75% by 2024. So how are you preventing that from impacting your competitive flexibility, the ability to respond to the market quickly?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question, because I think when you take a look at why businesses haven't made those kind of commitments, because they're scary. Trek's in a really good position as far as our place within the industry. We have a lot of influence. We have a lot of experience. We've got a long history of working with our suppliers. We have very intimate relationships throughout our supply chain. And I think what we're going to be able to do there is, this is a perfect example of an entire company getting behind a mission. Because for us to accomplish that, we are going to have to work so far upstream in the development process. We are going to have to make changes within our development cycle, and working with our suppliers, working with the supply chain, working with our forecasting team, working with our product team, working with the market. I mean, this change really does impact so many departments within the company to be able to pull this off, because it means that we are going to have to get things done earlier, in which to still be able to hit the timelines we need to hit to make sure that we're putting the right product in the right place at the right time. Because that really is, as business leaders know, that's really the secret sauce to financial success. We think we're going to be able to make that. That is something that we are committed to. And then the nice thing about having an entire company rallying behind the North Star is that we're already working on making those changes right now.
And it represents a movement that we've already been undertaking for the past 20 or 30 years since the rise of networks. And that is real-time manufacturing thinking. It isn't necessarily real-time manufacturing, but you just have to be that much more foresighted in your thinking.
Absolutely. It's going to require a lot of discipline. It really does. The report is already kind of paying some dividends for us, because it's just focusing us. It's really providing, it cuts through a lot of things and a lot of concerns. And, when we do have challenges or we do have concerns, it's nice to have something to fall back to and say, guys, this is what we committed to. This is what we need to figure out.
Now, the next idea that I think is particularly interesting is the idea of batched shipping, which you're doing in Europe now. So you're minimizing the number of times you send stuff. Do you also take into account the idea of home delivery? And because the bike industry is a very local shop-oriented experience, does that present special challenges in your relationship with your retailers if you are thinking about delivering to the home? And is delivery to the home potentially more or less effective in reducing your carbon footprint?
That's an interesting question. I think, take a look at the bike industry as a whole. We're still very much involved in the independent bicycle retailer network. Your local bike shop is still the place that most of those interactions happen. We have done in some markets, we have been able to go direct to consumer, while also considering we have ways of making sure that relationship between the local retailer, the local bike shop, and the customer stays intact and is actually supported through the customer's direct interaction with Trek. So I would say yes. There is absolutely ways to do this. In Europe, we have not crossed that bridge yet. So we're still very much a wholesaler, and we're going through retail there. And so that's an easy way for us to batch shipments. And the majority of our shipments are still to bike shops around the world, even within the United States, where we do have a mechanism for shipping directly to consumers. And we find actually many of our orders that come in through consumers directly to Trek are still click and collect orders. They still want to go into the bike shop to pick those up. They still want that kind of interaction.
That and in those, is incredibly important to the experience.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely is. We're still it's a tactile product. It's an experience-based product. For bikes, you still want to, many cases, you still want to ride it. You want to see it. You want to touch it. You want to, make sure it's the right size. There's a lot of reasons and so many benefits to being able to have that interaction in person. And the pandemic has changed and evolved a lot of the ways we've been able to do that. And we've helped our retailers through that. And they've been incredible to adapt to those changes. But I think there is absolutely a way. And when you take a look at also your shipping partners, how are you shipping products to those customers? Are you taking advantage of trucks that are already on the road and that UPS, FedEx, all of those shipping partners are already going to be out there. So is Trek planning on putting additional trucks out there, or are we going to be relying on the things that are already in place to get those products to consumers? Obviously, we're not an Amazon company. We don't ship through that channel, so that's not something that we have to worry about. But it's definitely a consideration.
The last one, and folks, there's 10 ideas here, but we're going to focus on 3. You should go read the rest. You're making a real investment to get to 100% renewable energy by 2023. Your global headquarters is already using a mix of wind, biogas, and solar power. How has that changed the cost of your energy? Is it going up or down? Because a lot of people believe that it's going to go up when you try to make these changes.
It's a great question. It does, there is going to be some economic investment in that. The nice thing, not nice, it's kind of a mixed bag. The interesting thing in a more hybrid-based work environment, which we've adapted to during the pandemic, is that, we've required a lot less energy at our own facilities. We have more people working at home. That's the next, I think, piece is helping how do you help your employees actually work in a more sustainable way? How do you educate them, and how do you help them put their own homes on a more sustainable energy usage path? And that's something that we're definitely going to be taking a look into. There is going to be a little bit of an economic investment. We feel it's the right thing to do, though. When you take a look at
a long-term dividend, though, does it lower your cost?
Massively, massive long-term benefit. When you're taking when we're looking at the crisis that is currently out there right now, you're taking a look at these. We can't put this investment off any longer. And short-term benefit, I think, is out the window. We need to be looking at long-term benefit and long-tail consequences of our decisions now, because I think we're living through them. Right, they're in front of us right now.
Well, of course, right? Because not only are you going to save money on the energy in the long term, but people are if we have smoke season now every year, which prevents people from riding.
Right. And
so if we make that investment, it also creates more opportunity for people to buy and use Trek bikes.
Sure. And what does the future look like for us if we don't make these investments now? You talk about economic investment now. What kind of investment we're going to require if we put it off another 10 years? Or is there going to even be a chance to make the investment at all within 10 years? Or are we going to be so far down the road that no amount of money or no amount of change is going to be able to put us on the right path? I can tell you that personally, we have solar panels at our home, and those were an investment that we made a couple of years ago. My energy bill last month was $0. We put so much energy, solar energy and solar technology, and has gotten to a place where it is so efficient. We put actually money back into the grid. We got a $20 credit from our gas and electric provider, and it's hard to actually say how exciting that is when you get a bill for the month and it's $0 because you've actually created more energy than you used. That's really a place that we would like to see this thing go.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk about this, because you made a very complex set of issues pretty easy to understand. we touched on some things like getting employees more efficient opportunities to work at home, for instance, which fall under normally scope 3 emissions. And it's never clear when we talk about scope 1, 2, and 3 for a lot of folks, what that actually means. So you're thinking across your entire supply chain and your entire enterprise in order to identify these opportunities, which over the long term both provide savings and improve business opportunity.
And that's absolutely correct. And I think we're just getting started. And we've been amazed at what we've learned in such a short time. And we're also humble enough to realize that there is so much to learn in this journey. And
that is such an important point.
The amount of opportunities that exists out there, though, it's massive. And there's low-hanging fruit. If I would say, if anybody's, if you're nervous about this or how this is going to work, or if it's going to work at all, there are so many things that you can do so quickly to just get started. And I would encourage anybody out there to really look at what those opportunities are, because the amount of difference that we've been able to make in this short time has been great. But we're committed to a much longer journey, and we're learning so much every single day.
Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with Earth911 today. I hope you'll come back and keep us up on your progress.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'd be happy to.
We've been talking to Eric Bjorling. He's the Director of Brand Marketing and Public Relations at Trek Bicycles. And folks, you can check out Trek at trekbikes.com. One word, trekbikes.com. We're going to be back with another episode of Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ears soon. Would you take a moment to share this podcast with your bicycle enthusiast friends and any business person or any company that you would like to see perform better? Because these are great examples of good decisions and thoughtful application. We're going to be back soon, as I said. Take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet until we get back together. We'll see you soon.